I were a digger, I'd rise in the morning and dig till my digging was done. I'd smash up the ground with an ear-splitting sound, then smash it again, just for fun.
If I were a digger, I'd flatten the hillsides and bite through the earth with my teeth. I'd empty my jaws, then steady my claws and bite off more dirt underneath.
If I were a digger, I'd be as strong as a bull, but I could be as gentle as a kitten. I'd tear things down so I could build something new, and I would work just as hard as I could.
If I were a front loader, I'd be a big-wheeled 30-ton lifting machine. I'd have a giant bucket with a strong, sharp edge on the bottom. I could lift almost anything. I could even pick up my mom's car and put it on the roof. But I wouldn't. Know what I'd do? I'd scoop dirt and gravel and anything else that would help out the other diggers, because we have a job to do.
If I were a front loader, my wheels might be as tall as a grown-up. My thick treads would grip the dirt and hold me steady while I pushed and pushed and pushed until I scooped up my whole load. Then I'd raise it up over my head and dump it.
If I were a front loader, I'd probably have a big hinge in the middle. That way I could turn tighter than most cars.
But what if I could turn even tighter? I could if I were a skid steer loader.
Skid steer loader!
I would slip and slide where no other diggers could go. I'd glide through the dirt like a dancer. Skid steer loaders are usually called bobcats because those were the first ones ever made. They don't turn their wheels to steer. Instead, they lock the wheels on one side and skid around by turning the wheels on the other side. That means they can turn around right where they are. And sometimes they're the only digger that'll do.
But wait, so my front gets a loader. What about the back?
Backhoe!
If I were a front loader, maybe I'd want a backhoe too. Then I'd be a backhoe loader. I'd have a scoop in front and behind. I know you've seen these around. They're everywhere. Backhoes dig trenches and can scoop a hole out of almost anything. Some backhoes can dig over 20 feet down under the ground. That's taller than a 2-story building. If I had a backhoe, I'd use sturdy jacks to lift me up. I'd plant my toes and push against them when I dig. Then nothing could knock me off my feet while I work.
But maybe I don't need another bucket in the back. I could have a smoother, so after I dig, I could make everything nice and even. Or a compactor. That dirt gets pretty bumpy when you dig it. A compactor would break up the dirt clods and make everything a lot softer. Or maybe a hammer. If I had a hammer, I could smash through anything and watch it crumble. Then I could scoop up the pieces and hand it over to the dump truck.
Dump truck.
I love dump trucks. Trucks like these drive on roads and can hold up to 20 cubic yards. You'd have to go back and forth with a wheelbarrow about 100 times to dump that much. And when they're full, they take their loads where they need to go and dump them.
Hydraulics.
Diggers can dig so strongly because of hydraulics. That's a system of hoses and pistons that pumps a thick, heavy liquid called hydraulic fluid to whichever part of the digger needs to move. When a digger wants to raise its bucket, the operator pushes a lever, and hydraulic fluid pumps into the bucket's piston and pushes up on the bucket. Hydraulics are very powerful.
Excavator.
If I were an excavator, I'd be king of the hill. At least until I dug up the hill, that is. I'd have one deep bucket, a hungry bucket. And there would never be too much dirt for me to eat. If I were an excavator, I'd have one long arm. So long it could reach across a 4-lane road. If I were an excavator, one of the coolest things about me would be my pivot. It would let me spin all the way around. 360 degrees, baby. So I could scoop anywhere and dump anywhere. I'd be one mean digging machine.
If I were an excavator, I'd probably move around on 2 monstrous caterpillar tracks. That would help me dig into whatever I'm standing on. Excavators like these are sometimes called track hoes, and they only go about 3 miles an hour. That's not very fast, and I wouldn't win any races. But I could dig a hole faster than any race car.
Water truck.
If I were a water truck, I'd be a gigantic swimming pool on wheels. I'd drive all over the construction site, spraying down the dirt with each one of my nozzles. Front, sides, and rear. Dirt gets pretty dusty when you dig it. And if I weren't there to spray it down, before long, no one would be able to see or even breathe because of all that dust. A water truck like this can hold about 6,000 gallons of water. That's like 100 bathtubs, all filled to the rim. And some water trucks can hold even twice as much water as that.
Bulldozer!
If I were a dozer, no one would push me around. I'd do all the pushing. Bulldozers are used to move the biggest, baddest, hardest to move dirt and rocks when nothing else can. If I were a dozer, my 2 tracks would stick to the dirt like glue, no matter how much I had to push. My blade could cut through the toughest ground, or lift boulders like they were toys. This one has a ripper on the back to break up the rough dirt underneath. That makes it easier for scrapers and graders to flatten out the land.
Scraper!
If I were a scraper, I'd be a big, bad hillside eating machine. I'd be the great white shark of diggers, but instead of rows and rows of teeth, I'd have rows of scraper blades. 15 of them in all. These blades are over 8 feet wide. The blades go round and round, biting into the ground, then rising up and spitting out the dirt into the scraper bowl. The bowl on this scraper holds about 23 cubic yards. That would fill about 35 refrigerators full of dirt. And the biggest scrapers hold more than 2 times that much.
If I were a scraper, I'd work as part of a team to flatten a giant area before the other digging begins. Scrapers are the first on the scene when you want to build a really big new building. They chase each other around in a big circle, slowly chewing the hills down until they're nice and flat. Then they drive to the side, dump their loads, and come back for more.
Motor grader!
If I were a motor grader, I'd have smooth moves. Wherever I found dirt that was lumpy or bumpy, I'd scrape it down, then spread it out like peanut butter on a sandwich. If I were a motor grader, I'd have only one blade. It would be about 5 feet long, and it could turn and spin in any direction. So I could push the dirt anywhere I wanted it to go. Motor graders are used to make new roads, to plow snow, and in lots of other places where things need to be nice and flat.
And as long as we're making things smooth, when streets get too many bumps and holes and grooves, they have to get new pavement called asphalt.
Cold planer!
Before you put down new asphalt, you need a cold planer. That's what scrapes up and removes the old road. If I were a cold planer, I'd have powerful, sharp blades to dig up the pavement, chew it up into little pieces, and send it up my long conveyor belt into a big dump truck. I'd creep along the street on my little tracks, demolishing the road and leaving nothing behind but little grooves.
Asphalt paver!
The paver lays down the new surface. Another dump truck pours the dry, raw asphalt into the hopper. Then it's heated and poured onto the road. Big rollers make sure the new asphalt comes out nice and smooth. It's hot and very smelly work. P.U. This machine can lay a new street 26 feet across at one time. That's more than 2 lanes at once.
Road roller.
Then road rollers run back and forth across the new street as it cools to make it flatter than a pancake. Road rollers are used anytime you need to mash loose dirt, sand, or asphalt into a tightly packed hard surface. This one is a ride-on double drum because the driver can ride on top, and it has 2 rollers to give it more weight and more flattening power. Water gets sprayed on the drum so the asphalt won't stick to it. The new road will be ready to drive on by next morning.
Cement mixer.
If I were a cement mixer, I'd have a huge drum full of sloshy, goopy liquid concrete. That's what you pour to make sidewalks, walkways, and foundations for buildings. The drum spins and spins while I'm waiting, so the concrete won't dry before I need it.
Trucks like these usually hold about 6 cubic yards of concrete. That's enough to fill up 2 cars right up to the ceiling. Yuck! This truck is called a rear discharge truck because the concrete comes out the back.
While the workers get the site ready, the drum spins one way to keep the concrete wet. And when it's time to pour, the drum spins the other way and pushes the concrete out the back. The concrete gets poured down the chute and dumped into wooden forms on the ground. Then the workers push it around and smooth it out so it will harden in just the right shape. It's hard, messy work.
Sometimes the concrete gets poured into a pump. You need a pump if the truck can't get close enough to where the concrete needs to be poured. Then the pump squirts it down a hose, and the workers can pour it wherever they need it to go.
Crane.
If I were a crane, I'd be as high as the sky. I'd perch way above everything on the site, and I'd be able to see all the action down below while I worked. When the dirt has been moved and the foundations have been poured, cranes do the heavy lifting so the building can finally be built. Tower cranes are the biggest kinds. They can reach as high as a skyscraper and might stay in place for a year or more. The operator works in a cabin at the top and controls the boom. That's the long arm that reaches way out and can swing all the way around to lift and lower whatever needs to be moved.
Truck-mounted cranes are smaller. The cabin is on the bottom, and the whole crane can be driven on wheels and moved easily. Cranes have a motor which pulls long cables along the boom. The cables drop down from pulleys and support the big hook that holds the load.
If I were a digger, I'd work really hard, and my driver would work even harder. At the start of each day, I'd crank up and say, I just can't wait to get started.
If I were a digger, my friends would all help me to build something new altogether. And whatever it takes, I hope it'll make the world just a little bit better.
Can you remember all the diggers we've seen today?
Let's take another look, and you say the names.
Front loader. Skid steer loader. Backhoe. Dump truck. Excavator. Water trucks. Bulldozer. Scraper. Motor grader. Coal planer. Asphalt machine. Road roller. Cement mixer. Crane.
Thanks for watching. Diggers are everywhere, so keep your eyes open for them. See you soon.